Recognizing functional or cognitive decline. Depending on where an elder is in the structure of the family, their dominance within the family, their past history, the more grand they are, the more dominant they are, the more difficult it is for us to shift our mind to recognize that they are failing. There have actually been presidents and vice presidents of big companies that have developed dementia and have virtually offloaded all of their job description to subordinates. So they're basically just sitting around in the office all day, and because they have a history of being a grand leader, their dementia isn't recognized until something horrible happens in that company. This happens in families too, and so we need to be cognizant of this and actually actively look for some of the signs that a person is having either functional or cognitive failure in their life. They may defer to others. They may gradually start to shift their responsibilities to someone else. If they do this, it's oftentimes with their spouse. And if that's not characteristic of the family dynamics, then it may stick out like a sore thumb. But if dad has always kind of relied on mom, then the fact that shifts even more may be hard to recognize. We may find the elder asking for help for things that they didn't characteristically ask for help before. Or, sadly, they may not ask for help and then start making mistakes so that bills don't get paid, the taxes don't get done right, this, that, or the other thing. You may pick up on a change in hygiene, and that could be either their personal hygiene, not being as well kempt as they otherwise were, or a change in the home environment. The home gets messier, the yard work doesn't get done. Something like this would connote or signal a decline in the person's function or their cognitive ability. Falls occur, and elders tend to hide the fact that they fall. This is one of many hidden symptoms in geriatrics. So you need to be alert to bruises and injuries and such that the elder may have hidden the event from you. Getting lost should be a big red flag, and one that so often comes up is poor driving skills. You don't want to be in denial. As I said, the more power, the more dignity, the more grand an individual is within their family structure, the more difficult it is for you to recognize that this person is failing. And when you do recognize that, it's also just hard to believe it. It's something you don't want to believe, and it's easy to be in denial. You also don't want to be buffaloed, because elders who are failing may very well recognize their own deficits. And if they do, they'll tend to hide them in most cases. It's not good for one's ego to say, I'm losing it. And so they'll tend to hide that. People that have very good social skills will always come up with an excuse for why they missed an appointment, why something didn't get done. And it's easy for us to accept that. But don't be buffaloed, because it is a warning sign. I wanted to throw in a slide here about competence and mental capacity, because this really cuts to the chase, and it oftentimes doesn't get massaged, doesn't get handled. And it's kind of square one. It's kind of like the first thing that needs to happen in your mind to determine whether somebody is their own boss or whether somebody else needs to take over and be responsible for that person's decisions in either personal or medical or financial decision making. Competence is a legal term. Whether you're competent or incompetent needs to be determined by a judge, by a court. Capacity, or mental incapacity, is actually a clinical decision that is made by one's doctor or other mental health professional. Now, a court does use the determination of a mental health professional, doctor, that someone is mentally incapacitated in order to adjudicate the competency or incompetency. But there is a difference between the two, and competence is a legal determination. Now, it's an axiom of Judeo-Christian law that everybody is competent until a court adjudicates them otherwise. So recognize this, that if we don't deal with this problem, and the person enters into a contract for aluminum siding or for this, that, or the other thing, and it was a really bad decision, and that bad decision came out of mental incapacity that was not recognized, not recorded, not formalized, then that contract needs to stand, even though it's a really bad contract for the elder or for their family. So that's one of the reasons this needs to be dealt with up front. There are also different rules or criteria for different kinds of capacity. Just to go over a little bit of that, not beat it to death, but in order to commit a crime or to stand trial, one needs to be competent to stand trial, and the rules for that are two. One needs to know the difference between right and wrong, and they need to be able to participate in their own defense. Think about it, that's actually quite a low standard, so that many of the things that happen to an individual who's mentally ill, mentally retarded, or demented may still stand the test of being a crime. Another good reason to deal with this up front, so that we can get it on paper that a person is not mentally capacitated, not competent before some bad event occurs. Testamentary capacity is the ability to make or change a will. And wills are tough to break if they happen and they're on paper, and then later on someone who gets cut out of the will says, well, mom or dad didn't know what they were doing. They were not in their own right mind. They were developing Alzheimer's. In order to have testamentary capacity, that also was a fairly low test. And it means that you need to know who your potential heirs are. Not necessarily who you do give money to, but who are the array of people that we would expect a reasonable person to consider in terms of their will. The second and only other test of testamentary capacity is to know the extent of one's bounty, to use the legal terminology. And that means, do they understand what wealth they have in proportion to the various things? They don't need to know right down to the dime what's in the bank account, but they have to have a general understanding of the value of things and what they have. I did get involved in one will that was contested, and we did break it because this old gal had willed one of her sons an antique car and had willed the other son a 4,000-acre ranch. Now, and she had said that she intended to treat them equally, that she loved them both equally and she was trying to treat them equally. Well, there's no equality between this antique car that was worth, a few $1,000s and a ranch that's worth a few $1 million. So we were able, in retrospect, to say that she did not have testamentary capacity and the will was broken. The tests for financial and medical and personal decision making are actually not codified in the law, but as a physician that does this all the time, and this is the way all docs that do capacity evaluations, what we consider is remembered by the mnemonic JOMAC. J is for judgment. Sometimes we look at the decision at hand that's actually called the person's capacity into question. Are they going into a nursing home? Are they not? Are they competent to make that decision? Are they looking at all the factors and weighing the risks and the benefits in the context of their own value system and their own goals for themselves? Are they aware of the consequences of the various array of decisions that they might make? Another way that I sometimes test judgment is to ask people to solve a hypothetical judgment question, like what would you do if you're the first person in a crowded movie theater to notice that the place has caught fire? If the individual cannot give me an answer, that means that they're going to not cause a panic. They're going to try to get an orderly exit from the theater. Then I consider that bad judgment. I did have one guy that said he would walk calmly to the exit door and turn around and yell fire. I did give him full credit for judgment, although he was an evil person. The O is for orientation. People need to be oriented to person, not only themselves, but who other people are. They need to have an orientation to a place, where are they, and to time. M stands for memory, and that can be both recent and remote memory. A is for the ability to think in the abstract, to be able to think deeper than the surface. When I test this in a patient, I will ask them to tell me the background meaning, the philosophical meaning, the underlying meaning of a familiar proverb. We try to use a proverb that they'd heard before, so we're not making them answer the question cold. So what does it mean that a rolling stone gathers no moss? And if they tell you that, well, it means if a rock rolls down the hill, it doesn't get dirty because the dirt doesn't stick to it. Well, that's not a good answer. We do have to be a little careful about abstract thinking, because low educational level historically will also match up with the inability to think deeply into problems. And so we not only look at what is their ability to think in the abstract, but what has it been throughout their life. So if there's a change in old age, we would consider this a flaw in their capacity. And C is the ability to calculate. Can they do simple mathematics? When a person makes their own decisions, one of the principle of medical ethics that we go by is that of autonomy. A person in our society has ownership of their own decisions over their own body, their own self, their own life. That's autonomy. But autonomy is not necessarily set in stone for all time, because if a person loses capacity, you might not be able to exercise autonomy for yourself. Similarly, at the other end of the life spectrum, children are not allowed autonomy. If Jimmy doesn't want his measles shot, Mom takes him into the doctor, and Jimmy says, no, I don't want the measles shot. Well, Mom says, yes, you're going to get it, and we get 3 goons or nurses to come and hold Johnny while he gets his measles shot. He's a minor. He doesn't have the capacity to make the proper decision that a measles shot is good for him, even though it's going to hurt a little bit when we do it. And so he doesn't exercise his own autonomy, his autonomy. He actually has the same rights as you or I, but his mom is in charge of those. In late life, and when people get dementia and lose mental capacity, they still have autonomy, but their autonomy is no longer exercised by themselves, but needs to be exercised by someone else. And we're going to talk about surrogacy in a little bit. Beneficence is often forgot about in medical ethics, but beneficence doesn't mean paternalism. It doesn't mean the doctor or the family is just doing what they want. But we do need to recognize that it is important and a responsibility of the physician, the nurse, the family, to do what is right for a person who cannot think accurately for themselves. And then justice is the principle of medical ethics that takes into account what's right for society. It's not just what's right for the individual. It also is what's right for society at large. And so if somebody has tuberculosis and they're mentally incapacitated to prevent the spread of that tuberculosis to other people, then it would be by this medical ethic principle the responsibility of caregivers to make something happen so that the public is protected and the TB is not communicated to others.
Mm-hmm.